Blessed be the Holy Trinity, one God, the fountain of living water, the rock who gave us birth, our light and our salvation. Let us pray. Holy and righteous God, you created us in your image. Grant us grace to contend fearlessly against evil and to make no peace with oppression. Help us, like your servant, Martin Luther King, Jr., to use our freedom to bring justice among peoples and nations, to the glory of your name, through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord.
A reading from Matthew. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life?" Holy wisdom, holy word.
Good morning. As president of Gustavus Adolphus College, I have the great privilege of welcoming you to this very special chapel service and memorial lecture recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. and his birthday. Before I ask Maya to introduce our speaker, I want to share with you why I feel it's important for all of us to recognize Dr. King on this very special day. I shared with some of you last year and with some of you who gathered for dinner last night that when I was a student at my undergraduate alma mater in the 1960s, I had a chance to visit with and to meet Dr. King. He came to our campus to have lunch and to give a lecture very similar to today. It was in 1965. And I had the chance, because I was asked by the chaplain at my alma mater, to gather with 7 other students to visit with Dr. King before the lecture. And it had an impression on me that I will never forget. And to the students that are here, you're going to have a similar opportunity today to hear from Dr. LaFayette about a movement that was so important to this world, and particularly to our country. I want to thank Congressman Walz for being here and taking time to come with his wife and family to be part of this ceremony, because we're facing in this country some things right now that are important for all of us to understand. Nonviolence, and what that means, and what Dr. King taught, and what Dr. LaFayette teaches. I then had an opportunity when I was president of Wartburg College to go with a group of students and do the Freedom Walk, and to go to all those places that were so special to all of us that remember those days. And then talking with Dr. LaFayette last night, you know, he's not just an individual that comes for a lecture on a day like this. He's coming home. He's coming home to a place that he called home during the early 1970s, from 73, 74 till 76, when he came here to begin our Peace Studies program. What a legacy he has left for Gustavus Adolphus College. And I look out and I see some of the faculty and staff that were with him during those years, and I know how much your friendship with him meant then. And I heard in his voice last night and today, as some of you were walking in and he greeted you, how much it's meant to him too. So students, take time to just think about what is happening in the world and the importance of what Dr. King has taught us. And Mrs. Lafayette, we're so pleased to have you here back home with your husband and to celebrate this time with us. Dr. Lafayette has been a director of the Organization of Peace and Justice, as well as all of the other things, a pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church, but I'm going to leave all those details to Maya to share with you as she introduces him. Maya is one of those special students on this campus who has led our May Day and done so many other activities in the Diversity Center. It is only appropriate that she introduces our guest speaker today. Maya, I would like you to come forward to introduce Dr. Lafayette. Thank you for coming to this very special occasion.
Can you see me now? Thank you, President Ohle. 43 years. 43 years ago, on April 4th, 1968, a hero, an activist, a dreamer, and a true leader was assassinated. 43 years ago, this man died, but his dream lives on. In New York, on this day, they celebrate Dr. King with parades, concerts, and many other tributes. In Washington, D.C., they celebrate Martin Luther King by hosting musical festivals at the Kennedy Center or tributes at the Smithsonian. But here at Gustavus, today, we honor Dr. Bernard Lafayette, a man who has made a great difference in the United States, as well as here at Gustavus Adolphus College, to help keep Dr. King's dream alive. When trying to introduce an amazing man such as Dr. Lafayette, one requires much more time than this short introduction allows. However, in this time, I hope to do him justice. Dr. Lafayette earned his bachelor's degree from the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, and his master's and doctorate from Harvard University. In 1960, he was the co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and leader of the Nashville Movement and Freedom Rides, as well as the Selma Movement in 1961 and 1965. Dr. King appointed him National Program Administrator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and National Coordinator of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. Dr. Lafayette's activism also impacted Gustavus. He was very active in the starting of the Gustavus Peace Studies program and was appointed the first director. Dr. Lafayette gave high praise to the program at the time of his work here, saying, "The Gustavus proposal is the only one of its kind that I know of in the country. The fine point that separates this program is its level of involvement." And he went on to say, "The degree to which this program anticipates getting all of the students and faculty involved goes far beyond anything that now exists. We are honored to associate this great man with our school." In a staff conference a year before he died, Dr. King said, "Now is the time to really educate and train people in nonviolence as the more noble path to social justice." On the morning of Dr. King's assassination, he stated to Dr. Lafayette that the next movement should be to make nonviolence institutionalized and international. Dr. Lafayette has since devoted his life to carrying out Dr. King's dream, and hopefully, I have no doubt you will all be just as moved to go out and make a difference following Dr. Lafayette's words. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming from Emory University, Dr. Bernard Lafayette to the podium. Thank you.
God for being here and the change in the weather. And thank you, Maya, for that introduction, and President Ohle, thank you for your warm words of welcome. And I can't tell you that he does make me feel at home. He reminds me a little bit of Karsten. And we have a very warm relationship. And I want to also thank Chaplain, Ms. Rachel Lawson, and all of those who made it possible for me to be here. And want to especially thank Mr. Virgil Jones, who I want to say he was very adamant about my coming. And he pursued me. And when his emails didn't work, he got on the telephone. And his cell phone sounded to me like it was a prison, you know, a cell phone. Because I was used to, you know, being in cells and that sort of thing. So it was okay. But his tenacity really made it possible. And I have just been so excited about being here and meeting old friends and being reminded of the activities we had and experiences here at Gustavus, Adolphus College. In fact, I was actually in prison when I was called for the interview to come to Gustavus. I was in Reno, Oklahoma, doing a workshop in prison, and Karsten, who was the administrator here, called my house in Boston and asked for me and my wife, Kate LaFayette, who's with me. And it's such a delight because we really enjoy working together and being together as well. She answered the phone, and when he asked for me, she said, "He's in jail." So we finally got things understood, and so I came directly here from Oklahoma and sat for an interview. So coming from jail to be here is sort of a natural thing for me. Oh no, that's not the end of it. Guess where I am going when I leave here? To the prison down near Redwood? Red Wing. I'm going to Red Wing Prison when I leave here today. Can you imagine that? So Gustavus Adolphus has always been sandwiched by prisons. And we had so much fun with Paul Tilquist last night talking about our prison experience in New York, Green Haven. So, in other words, my association with Gustavus is being in prison, and it's a good place to be because you're in very good company with many of those who have written the scriptures that we read. They are really jailbirds. That's who we've been following in the epistles. Jailbirds. And when I think of the many kind of experiences that helped me to grow and develop, I have to say that prison was a place where you were able to reflect and to grow and develop ideas. So I think that even Mandela, when Nelson Mandela from South Africa, spent so many years, I think it was 27 years in prison. Whatever would make a person in prison for 27 years think that he would come out and be the president of the country? I think that we have to value the fact that if we could imprison our minds and to lock up important ideas, that we could then find that creativity within us, because we don't have to worry about so many of the other things in life. We don't want to spend a life in prison, but just for a moment. Because actually people in prison only the average person makes about 6 decisions a day. Those of us on the outside, our average is about 22. You have to decide what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, whether you're going to answer that email, and now it's probably even more decisions that you have to make. But in prison, you only make 6. You don't decide what time you wake up. You don't decide what you're going to wear. You don't decide. No. We need to pause. And I think each of us would be so much better off if we could find that moment. We can call it meditation. That's a way of imprisoning our minds. Why don't we find a moment every day and call it meditation? And then just lock up our minds and think about our values. One of the questions that we should always ask in meditation is, why am I here? Why am I here? I had the great privilege of being with my grandfather, who lived to be 96 years old, and my being a minister, young minister. He approached me one day and said to me, "I'd like to ask you a question." "Sure, Daddy." We call him Pop. "Sure, Pop." Pop said, "All of my friends, are gone." He'd gone to funerals of all of his friends, and he didn't have any more of his older friends. He had some younger friends. And he looked at me and asked me one of the most profound questions I've ever been asked. And it was not rhetorical. I was hoping it was rhetorical, but it was not rhetorical. He said, "Why am I still here?" Maybe that's a good question for meditation. Why am I still here? So it was a literal question, so I had to give him a literal answer. So I was glad I had some theological background. And so I said to him, "Well, actually, Pop, God made all of the earth and all of the things that we see, the heavens and the skies, that sort of thing. And even after he'd completed all those things, great God of creation, can you imagine? God said, I am still lonely. Imagine God being lonely. And then he said, I'll make a man. So I said, Pop, you are here so that you can keep God company. Because God otherwise would be lonely without you. So being with God is also being in the company of God, so that God would not be lonely. And going beyond that, we must continue to work in the company of God. we are employees in this company. Yes. And we have great benefits, especially the fringe benefits are just wonderful in this company. Yes. So we will never be unemployed if we stay in God's company. Now, I must tell you that here at Gustavus Adolphus College, I had no imagination of what this experience would be like. But I was so excited because I was doing the last semester of my graduate work, and others were assigned to do 1 year of internship in my program. Some went to be assistant superintendents, and some went to be assistant principals of schools, and any kind of administrative position where a person would gain the experience as an educational administrator. Some were vice presidents of colleges and stuff like that for a year before they got the degree. But my program allowed me to do a thesis. So I didn't really have it actually to do a program for a year. And it was not a coincidence. It was providential that I was invited here to establish a program where you would put courses in each of the departments, peace courses. My goodness, that's what my thesis was about. How do you sustain and organize these programs? And maybe that's why I was selected to come. And it was fun, I tell you, it was fun. And besides, I finished my thesis. I finished writing my thesis in 3 months, record time. Because the weather was even colder than it is now. Oh no, when we arrived here in St. Peter in the winter of '73, the temperature was 42 degrees below zero without the wind chill factor. And the next day it went down to 43, 44. And I asked my wife, did we make the right decision? And she said, yes, even though she's an Alabama girl, okay? We had one of the most exhilarating experiences. Because I said last night, you don't know what warmth is until you find the warm hearts of a people. And here at Gustavus, it was another world for us. We did not experience the kind of prejudice that we were accustomed to, even in the North, like Boston and Cambridge and Philadelphia and other places. There's a uniqueness here. No place is perfect, but we did not experience any negative attitudes. The hearts of people warmed us to such a degree to the temperature outside became negligent. It had no place. I even got a pair of skis. We had a chance to ski down the slope there. And I had the skis on, really, you know, when I was skiing. And then we went down a really fast hill, and my body turned upside down, and my head pierced the snow. And then when they finally dug me out, I took off my skis, and I have them stored right now. Very special place on the back porch. But I went ice fishing, and we had a great time, and we loved it. You will not find too many places, and I've been a lot of places, but you will not find too many places like Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter. No. In fact, we always refer to it, okay, as a haven. Yeah. And Our memories are many, and we have very fond memories by experience here. And so many things we did, and the relationships so deep and long. Very powerful experience. We established the first program of its kind here, of all places, out here, okay, at Gustavus Adolphus College. There are many things that I can tell you and share with you, and I will have the opportunity to answer questions. But one of the things that should be known is that the headquarters of COPRED, Consortium of Peace Research, Education, and Development, used to be right here at Gustavus Adolphus College. And many of the people who we look at as notables came here and visited. It was a wonderful opportunity for people to be exposed to this environment and the people who are here. The other thing is that when you think of Gustavus, you don't think of some small enclave, but you think about global experiences. It was here at Gustavus Adolphus College where I had the opportunity to go to all of the Scandinavian countries, all of them. And even we went to Russia back in the day, Leningrad, yes. So here is a place that's more global in its direction and experience. In fact, we were here when we had one of the Nobel conferences, and all the laureates came and had the opportunity to hold the hood of one of those peace laureates who was given a doctorate degree. The world came to Gustavus. Well, let's say the world comes to Gustavus, and it's continuing to come. I like what I see. Yes, you're working towards that in many ways. So I want to say this by way of introduction and to tell you how warm our hearts are to receive your warmth and hospitality. And I have to come here to find out what I did because of my memory as we get older. Yes. So I know it was only 40 years ago, but I'm told that when you get older, you remember things that happened way back when. The things in between you're not sure about, and you remember nothing about what happened yesterday. Yeah. So I have to recollect information so I can recollect and be able to appreciate the specifics. Now then, the subject this morning is supposed to be lose, gain, and be gained. First you say, what are you going to do with that subject? Here we go. The scripture says that he who seeks to save his life will lose it. Yeah. If you lose your life, for my sake. Okay. You got it? Yeah. So it's not about how much you can gain in life. It's what you can lose for the right cause. When I talk about my experiences in the movement, one of the questions I always get, but were you afraid? Were you ever concerned about your safety? And the answer is, I had one fear in the movement. And that was that my grandmother and my grandfather would not have the opportunity to experience being treated like human beings before they died. That was my urgency. That was my fear. That they would be able to go where they wanted to go and ride whatever public transport they chose, and be able to choose their own seat and be able to enjoy some of the riches of life, of being a human being. That was my fear, and that was my urgency. That's why I could not wait. Unless you have found something in life worth dying for, Martin Luther King said, you've not lived. So you've got to lose. You've got to lose the notion that your breathing every day is more important than anything else. Except you're willing to make a sacrifice for something that's right, then maybe you're already dead. As Martin Luther King says, death is not just a cessation of breathing. He said there are people for all practical reasons are walking around dead. Lose it. Turn it loose. Lose it. Yes. The grip that you have on false possessions, lose. There are some people who suffer loss involuntarily. But the scripture here is talking about making a choice. Yeah. Turn it loose. Lose it. So Martin Luther King believed in nonviolence because he came to discover there was something more powerful, much more powerful. And when he discovered that, he understood that it was something that you had to give away. And the irony is that when you gave it away, it replenished itself in multiple folds. Something that you cannot run out of. Yeah. Gustavus, here's something you don't know. You've heard of the U.S. Institute for Peace. They lobbied Congress. Oh, and we have our congressman here. Yes, Congressman. You are just, Walsh, we just so appreciate you and the kind of commitment you have and your wife, and that is so special. And John Lewis, my very good friend, you know, they both have found places where they can make a difference, not just for themselves, but the world. Andrew Young was in Congress for about 2 years, and he introduced a bill to establish the U.S. Institute for Peace in Washington, D.C., funded by the federal government. Many people don't even know about it. We know about the Department of Defense, but we have essentially a U.S. Peace Institute that's funded by the federal government. And Gustavus Adolphus played a very important role in that institute. In fact, it was Karsten, who I mentioned, Bob Karsten, who testified before a congressional committee. And his testimony was about the peace education program at Gustavus Adolphus College. We're on record, okay? As an example, okay, of what that bill would mean and the importance of that proposal. Our worth as individual human beings is not based on our bank accounts, our investments, stocks, property, real estate, all of that. No. You say, well, how much are you worth? No. Your real worth is how much are you worthwhile to others. Are you worth anything? Will anybody miss you when you're gone? That's your worth. What are you worth? No. Can't count up numbers and figures, even if you use calculators and other kind of technical instruments. No. It's how much do you mean to others? That's the challenge. But those are the values that we find here at this college. Those are values that are instilled, making you worthwhile. And you must learn to embrace those kinds of values as you continue to learn and study, not to enrich yourself, but what you can mean to the rest of the world. Well, when you look at it, we don't know how long we're going to be here. It's a short trip. And the older we get, the shorter the trip. Just a short trip. But we think about Martin Luther King, age 39. The older we get, the younger that seems. That's young. But I had the opportunity to work with him. That's when I dropped out of school, when I saw this was once in a lifetime to be able to have the opportunity to serve and to be with someone who had such deep conviction and deep passion for justice. Oh, I should quickly explain something, because our literature and the books that have been written about Martin Luther King simply does not at this point really explain what Martin Luther King's goal was. Martin Luther King's goal was not to desegregate buses or to desegregate eating facilities or just simply to help people get the right to vote or help people get out of poverty or equal housing. No. You see, the whole idea of oppression was to exploit those people who were felt to be powerless so that people could gain more for themselves and far less for others. That's what it was about. It was about gaining at the expense of others. But you see, there are two parts to oppression. You've got to have someone who's willing to oppress others, and then you've got to have the cooperation of the people who are being oppressed. Because without the cooperation, you couldn't make the system work. You know what England tried to do to us. Yeah. So what happened is that these practices and laws that were put in place to segregate people had more to do with enforcing in the minds of people that they were inferior, and the others to help them appreciate the fact that they were superior. That's why the whole idea of sitting down together became a threat to oppression. That's what it was about. They knew that people were close to each other. How close can you get when you are nursing the baby? Okay? and they got black women who were slaves even to nurse the babies. How close could you get? Sitting down? Sitting down, well, didn't even come close to that. So it wasn't about sitting down, okay? It was an idea of trying to reinforce in the minds of people that they were not as good as others. So you had to find ways of doing that. So the whole idea was to challenge these specific laws and practices. But the more important thing that Martin Luther King was concerned about was not simply changing the law, because you can change the law without changing the practice. So the whole idea was to get the people who were oppressed to join together with those who were considered oppressors and form a coalition between those people, and then to ignore those unjust laws. And I think another thing needs to be said today, emphatically, that whites participated in that movement and made a very special contribution. Selma, Alabama, one black was killed, Jimmy Lee Jackson, in that movement. 3 whites. One theological student and one minister. And then a woman from the Detroit community who I knew personally. Gustavus drove me from Birmingham to Selma because I couldn't fly into Montgomery. There were no planes available during the Selma March. And I was recruiting people from Chicago at that point. And she's the one that drove up to Birmingham to pick me up. I was in the very car where she was killed. She was the one that would drive people anywhere they wanted to go. She left her family, children, yeah. She put her body in the movement. Yeah. She was driving back one night when the march was completed. That same night, she was driving people back from Montgomery to Selma, where people lived who marched down. And a group of Klansmen in a car drove up next to her and plummeted bullets. Her car went off the road. She slumped over the steering wheel, fell back. But in that car was another fellow, a young fellow from Selma, Alabama. And when the car came to a halt, he slowly lifted up his head. When he lifted up his head, he saw men approaching the car. And he quickly snapped his head back down in her lap. And blood covered his face and head. And when the men approached the car and looked over, all he saw was 2 bloody bodies. All they saw was 2 bloody bodies, and assumed that both of them were dead. They walked away. The fellow lifted up his head and made sure they were gone. It was her blood that saved him. Her blood covered him, saved his life. She gave her life, and even in the process of giving her life. No, in this case, it was not losing her life. It was given. And he lived as a result of that. Her blood. So when we think about the March on Washington, look at the large number of white people who were on that march. Yes. In Mississippi, the largest single contingency, when you did the demographics, were young Jewish women from Chicago. Now it's understood that as a strategy in the movement, one of the main points in the strategy, and Martin Luther King taught this down at Frogmore, South Carolina. We used to go and have retreats. And we used to retreat at Highland Folk School and also at a little place there in Frogmore. He would go to the blackboard and talk to us, and I remember the many things he said, and that's why we've codified them into our training program. He said that no revolution has ever been won unless you're able to win the support, if not the active involvement, of the majority. Black folks didn't have enough votes in Congress to pass a civil rights bill. Who do you think passed the civil rights bill? Who do you think signed it? So the whole idea is that through nonviolence, you have the power then to influence the conscience of people and the decency of people, bringing out the very best in people. That's how change came about. It's not combating people and calling them a lot of names and trying to degrade them and broad brush and no. No. It's standing for what is right, but taking the right stand. It's one thing to be right in your position. It's another thing to be right in your approach. And the goals that you're trying to achieve should be reflected in your own behavior. That's how we know it's possible to achieve the goal. And that's what nonviolence does. That your end that you seek must pre-exist in the means that you use to get there. That was the difference. And that's why the movement that Martin Luther King led was successful. Because it followed certain principles and certain steps. So when we think about the contribution that Martin Luther King made, it was just not marching in the streets and speaking at rallies, but it was putting that into action. And the most important thing that was in Martin Luther King's plan was to change the oppressed people's behavior by changing their minds about themselves. In other words, people behave based on how they feel that they are perceived. So what you have to do in that case is help them to get a different perception. Then they behave differently. And that's our responsibility. Yes. Somehow that's the greatest challenge we have towards the violence that we experience in our world today. How people think they are perceived. Yes, we have to help change that perception. And once we're able to successfully change that perception And people say, well, what can you do when people have been disrespected, disregarded, and all of the negative things that happen to people? How do you expect them to look at themselves? How do you expect them to? The response to that is this: it's not the experiences that you go through in life that determines your perception. It's your interpretation of those experiences. That people can go through the same set of experiences and come out differently. Yes, twins. Folks who grew up in the same household. One becomes a judge, and the other is a constant inmate. Yeah. It's based on the interpretation. Those interpretations. How do you get these interpretations? The interpretations come as a result of understanding those experiences and how they apply to them. That's how people get the interpretations. That's why it's so important in working with children that we constantly ask them questions about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because they're going through experiences on a daily basis. We have to talk to them. We have to understand what's going on in their minds. And we have to constantly use our rod. Yes. Spare the rod and spoil the child. It's one of the most misunderstood portions of Scripture. But you need only to look at where else do you find the rod mentioned. I think it's the 23rd Psalm, isn't it? Yeah. Thy rod and thy staff should do what? Comfort thee. The rod was not meant to beat up on people. No. The shepherd who used the rod and staff, and that's the reference, the staff was used to help the shepherd, number one, walk on uneven ground, to get some balance. It was a walking stick. So what was the rod for? The rod was to guide the little sheep away from the edge of the cliff and get them back to the herd. I don't remember any time when the rod was used to beat up the sheep or either the lambs. Comfort thee. Sorry about that, parents. Yeah. Well, they whipped me and I came out all right. Are you sure? No, that was not one of the things that we wanted to do, was to, misuse the rod. Thank you. Now, you have the opportunity to learn about the movement, to learn about these things. You have an opportunity to understand the importance of giving yourself and being able to gain, but also to be gained, because you become part of an important company with God. Being in company with God. That's what the end of life is all about. Now, many of my friends and all of the heroes in the movement are gone. We have to carry on. And this is not a 100-yard dash. It's a marathon. That's what this journey is about, a marathon. And I'm here to tell you this morning, we're passing the torch. Gustavus, we're passing the torch. And the torch is in your hand. don't use the torch to burn what we have built down. Don't burn down what we've built with the torch, but use the torch as a light so that others will know how to follow. It's in your hands.
Thank you, Dr. LaFayette, for your wonderful remarks. We're going to give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions. So Professor Gerspaw will be on that side of the room, and I'll be on this side. So if you have a question, please stand up, raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone to you.
Okay, thank you.
Question over here.
First, thank you very much for coming. I know we all appreciate it. My question is, to what extent have your views about the core importance of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement changed over time?
Okay, I'm so sorry, I didn't get that.
To what extent have your views on the core elements of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement that you participated in changed over time?
The views of the movement changed over time? Core values?
Your views.
What?
Your views about the movement and Martin Luther King. How have they changed over time?
Oh, yes. Well, in the beginning, my views about the movement was more domestic, in the sense that I was thinking only about the United States and the experiences that we were having, particularly in the South. Not only in the South, but primarily the segregation and the exploitation and that sort of thing. And he was, of course, learning from Mahatma Gandhi's movement and other nonviolent proponents like Damelda Kamara from Recife was a nonviolent proponent as well. But over the years, I came to understand how these concepts and principles of nonviolence that Martin Luther King used were applicable to many situations abroad, and not just, you know, the situations where you had overt violence, but the internal violence that people do to themselves, okay, by accepting these perceptions and then acting out and behaving that way. So I've just been experimenting over the last, you know, 45 or 50 years with, you know, nonviolence, and seeing how it would apply to other countries and their problems and situations. And I'm working in Nigeria now with about 20,000 Nigerian militants, and we've been able to incorporate the nonviolence training into their lives as well. So it's the universal application of nonviolence, and that's the thing that has changed. And of course, I also understand how it can be applied not only to domestic United States, okay, but home situations, dealing with family, okay, in churches, okay, and even in communist countries like Cuba. We have a Martin Luther King Center in Havana, Cuba, working with the churches, okay? And now other people in the government have gotten interested in the nonviolence training. So that's one of the things that has happened, and my view has changed in terms of the broader application of nonviolence. Yes.
Is there anybody else that has a question?
So here.
Thank you so much for being here. What advice do you have for us young people who are just starting to get involved in justice work, especially practical, hands-on things we can do?
Okay. My advice for people who are getting involved in these kind of programs is that take a good survey of the different kinds of problems and issues, and then study in depth. Like one of the first steps in nonviolence is information gathering, so we can really understand more deeply the intricacies of that problem and not on the surface. Let me give you an example using Gustavus, okay? A group of us, I was faculty and staff people, went to Boston, Massachusetts, to study the problems there. And I think Dr. Tilquist was one of those who went with us. And we went into the community in Boston, and we had different teams assigned to different areas. We had some people were assigned to look at the media presentation on the problem of busing. They called it busing because they were busing black students, African Americans, from Roxbury to South Boston High School. And so there was a lot of outbreak of violence, and they were throwing bricks at buses and that sort of thing, etc. So we went to look at the problem objectively. Okay, a team of us. I forgot how many it was. Maybe 6 of us, huh? 6 of us, thank you. That's why I came back to Gustavus so I can get my facts right. Okay. 6 of us. And some were assigned to look at media coverage, okay, newspaper, television news presentations on the problem. So we had to see what the media was saying first, because the media is so important in terms of contaminating or either enlightening folks' views of things. We depend on it, okay? So it was important to know what the people were getting. A little version here. Martin Luther King read 5 newspapers a day, where possible. And he did not stick with the New York Times, all right? Chicago Tribune, whatever city he was in, he would get the newspaper that, okay, as well. So that he would have an appreciation for what views were being expressed through the media. He was very interested in knowing the other side. Now, I went to law school for a year, so I understand that it's important to be able to understand the other side. But I also understand that football coaches also watch the game tapes so they can know what's happening on the other side. Okay? So knowing your opponents or a different point of view is very important. So that informs your own point of view, and also it might change your point of view. Okay? So it's like doing your doctoral thesis or master's. What we as professors are looking for is how much you know about what the opposite position is. So if you can appreciate the opposite view, that strengthens your own thesis that you have thoroughly investigated. So that was the purpose of going to Boston. We just put all the assumptions aside. Let's go and see what's happening. Let's see what people are saying. Our research was the only research that was done that way. Did you know that? We have a unique view of what happened in Boston as a result of that. Of course, we had very intelligent faculty members, you know, and they put on their street clothes type, you know, and went into the bars Some enjoyed that part. To just listen to, conversation and stuff. I didn't go. So you got to know where to go, okay? I didn't go. But, well, here's what we came out with, making a long story short. We came out with the conclusion based on simple facts. One is that in South Boston, and in that particular period, places and cities in United States, pertinent states, you had the highest cost of living, most expensive places to live. That was like Washington, D.C., New York, okay? Places like that, and Hawaii was another one, okay, etc. In South Boston, it was the only place in Boston where you could still rent an apartment for $100 a month. And some people had worked over the years to get their family members within the same block. Okay? So on the weekends, like Saturdays, on Sundays, they could block off the entire street and have block parties anytime they got ready. Because it was a family. Majority of people were families. Okay? So that's one of the things that, there was another thing that reinforced the behavior, and that is most of the students from South Boston High School did not go to college. In fact, the places they were busing people from to South Boston, you had a higher number going to college in Roxbury than you did in Boston, than you did in South Boston. Because most of those students who would graduate, they had guaranteed jobs working for the city. Fire department, police department, clerks down. They had a thing going on. They had a union. Okay? So what happened is that they were protecting property. Guess what? They had blacks who had lived in South Boston, gone to school to South Boston High School, had never been called the N-word. But when they had the influx, okay, of blacks going in, that had more to do with their property values. You see? It wasn't racial attitudes. It was economic, real estate issues. So we have to understand the root of the problem before you can begin to attack the problem. So that's what we did here at Gustavus Adolphus College. And I got to find that research that we came out with. If we can find that, it'd be good. I love that because that's an important chapter. But that's an example, okay? So choose, after you do a survey of the different kind of issues, and then decide how you're going to go into, what direction you want to go into. But don't stay narrow. Always look for opportunities to explore, okay? And that would be my advice. And make your life worthwhile, I would say. Give it all you got. Get serious. Go crazy, okay? Okay. Yes?
Question over there.
Thank you again so much for being here with us. My question is, tagging on to this last one, how do we generate momentum in a movement when living in a culture of Minnesota nice, when healthy discourse is somewhat in many ways discouraged, when passion can be viewed as hostility and somewhat squashed out? How do we as a young people, as an individual, garner momentum and get people from the minority and the majority to work together when it's not all that easy to get people shook up?
Okay. Well, we shook up a lot of people when I was here. So I'd have to rethink. Maybe a different kind of approach might be necessary. But I think it's through example that people learn. In your own behavior, example, okay? Now, a lot of people may not have gone a lot of different places, but you'll find, for example, here, and maybe true in other places in Minnesota, that people speak to you, okay? They really do. And that means that they recognize your humanity. When people ignore you, okay, it's like passing a tree or a lamppost, you know. Like you're ready and you're walking down the street, you know, and you're looking at somebody coming and you want to say hello, okay. And I like your hat or your vest. And so my point is, you have to be that example. Speak anyhow, whether people recognize you or speak back at all. Don't let other folks govern your behavior, okay? You be that example. Now I have to confess, and I think it's important because we learn through our errors as well. A lot of things we learn through mistakes we make. Like I was in Chicago, all right? And at the Conrad Hilton Hotel, and I was up on one of the upper floors, and I got on the elevator, and there was a fellow on there, he had a suit and tie on, etc. And I said, hello, how you doing? It's a white fellow. Nothing. So I said to myself, okay, you know, maybe he's preoccupied with something else and doesn't want to speak. So, you know, but I'm just going to be myself, you know what I mean? And I said, well, start talking about the weather. That's an easy subject, right? Yeah, Chicago is common. Nothing. So it's like talking to yourself. But I talked. Doesn't matter, okay? Got down to the ground floor, okay? And there was some kind of conference going on, a convention. And I walked into the lobby, complete silence. All these people standing around, you must know that, okay? And they didn't look like Quakers to me. I know Quakers, okay? Guess what? It was what we used to call in the old days a deaf and dumb conference. People couldn't speak, and they couldn't hear, okay? That's why the fellow didn't respond to me, because he didn't hear me. He was deaf. And I was dumb. So my point is, what does it do to you when people treat you certain ways? Don't allow that to happen. Fight back. Your tendency is to assume something negative. All right? And even if the person chose not to speak and they heard you, don't you follow their example. Don't do unto others as you would have them. You be the example. Now, one of the things could happen, I don't know if it will, but here at Gustavus, suppose there was a program where the students would be able to go to the prison and teach peace education, starting with maybe the juvenile facility. And professors would give them credit for going out and doing this kind of work. Okay? And suppose they got trained here in nonviolence and would choose to go to Ghana, to Nigeria, and places like that to help people learn how to incorporate these values and that sort of things into their own, you know, culture, educational system. In other words, if you would be that example to others, then people would be able to see it in action. That's the point. It's one thing to lecture and talk at people about what they should do, etc. But if you can give them specific tools, and one of the most important things I found out in teaching nonviolence is that when people can see how they can incorporate that into their immediate environment, their personal environment, like the family. Like one of the people we trained over in Nigeria could not read and write. And he told me, well, he told the entire group, he had killed 170 people. Yeah, say we pass judgment, that's the terminology, pass judgment on 170 people. And then he went on to say that his wife loved nonviolence even more than he did. But she hadn't gone to any of the training. She didn't know anything about how did she? You know what he said? I don't beat her anymore. His wife got the results of his nonviolent training. He didn't beat her anymore. She used to get the gauze and the alcohol and the bandages and all that kind of thing and get ready every weekend to get this beating because he loved her, and that's the way he showed his concern and care and passion for her, to beat her. She was to send the children away to the sister's house, get ready for this beating. Now she was in culture shock, not getting beaten or abused anymore. So in other words, nonviolence training and peace training must also transform the individual who, okay, is working to transform others as well. So that's the answer. I don't remember what the question was.
One more question over there.
One final quick question. I'm just wondering, like, if you have like racism happening, or if like you see racism, it's more like with like kids our age. I believe it's like jokes or like people that don't understand what like is going on like with your race. But what do you do? I mean, what should you do?
When people tease each other with kind of racist things.
Yes. Oh, I see. Okay, that's a very good question too. Yeah, that's another good question. What happens in some cases, people use humor, but humor is serious humor, because they would not use that unless there was something that generated that, and something that approximate their views, okay? So my recommendation is that when people do that, you come back and the response should be not to condemn them, not to give them a lecture, okay? But give them a better example of humor. Okay? In other words, they will learn from you by your example, and they will not find their jokes funny anymore, because they themselves will be the only ones who will laugh. And the purpose of a joke is to elicit others to join you in the humor. So find a better joke would be my solution. Getting to a more serious level, sometimes people tease each other, and then it turns out to be this particular time when people say, get angry. They say, well, why we do this all, why are you acting up today? Usually things that cause people to break out in violence has to do with a history. And then sometimes we mistakenly try to deal with the problem on the surface when there is a history of experiences that precedes that particular outbreak. It's not spontaneous. And we try to solve that problem superficially, as they call conflict resolution, separating people so they won't combat. We believe in nonviolence, conflict reconciliation. So instead of separating people, we bring them together in a new relationship. That's how we know the problem is solved. Resolve is temporary. Okay? All right. Reconciliation is more more permanent. So even in the teasing and the jokes and that kind of thing, you don't have to, this is not the time that you want to distance yourself from those people. This is a time when you want to engage in a much more positive and powerful way by your own example. Okay? All right.
Thank you, Dr. LaFayette. We remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s insight that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So let us have a brief prayer, and I'll send you with the peace. Gracious God, may we see nothing in isolation. May we know ourselves connected to one another and to all people of the world. Therefore, we commend ourselves and our work for justice to your goodness, O God. Amen. May the peace of God be with you all. I invite you to share a sign of that peace as you leave this day.